At the Christmas dinner, my family cast me aside. I remember the exact moment, standing there, right inside the doorway. The big dining table was a picture, just like in a magazine. It glittered with crystal and silver, candles flickering, casting a warm, happy glow. There were so many places set, so many chairs, each one filled, or clearly waiting for someone important. I saw all the children, my daughter-in-law's parents, even a few distant friends laughing already, toasting. Everyone had a spot, a space at that grand, joyful table. But not me, not the woman who, in her heart, felt like the very foundation of this family. No, my chair wasn't there. My place was in a small, forgotten corner, near the kitchen. A little card table, really, with a cheap plastic tablecloth. A single plate. It felt like a prop, an afterthought, like I was an unwelcome guest, not the matriarch. It was a silent humiliation, a quiet shunning, right in front of everyone. I watched them. Oh, how I watched them. Their faces were bright with cheer. Their laughter echoed, full and unrestrained. They exchanged gifts, tearing wrapping paper with excitement. Each happy sound, each shared glance felt like a small, sharp knife twisting in my chest. My heart was breaking, not with a loud crash, but in a slow, silent crumble. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the warmth of the room unable to reach me in my cold, isolated corner. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was an emotional chasm that felt wider than any ocean. They didn't know, not really. They were eating food I had often paid for, sitting under a roof that deep down was still mine. This house, the very place where they so casually pushed me aside, held a secret I had kept for years, believing I was protecting them, building a soft place for their lives to land. But that night, their joyful noise, their oblivious celebration, became the final straw. It wasn't just a bad Christmas dinner. It was the crushing weight of years of emotional coldness finally breaking me. While they raised their glasses to togetherness, to family, I was quietly toasting the end of my own blind dedication. They thought they were giving me loneliness as a gift. And yes, in that moment, it felt like the heaviest burden. But as I sat there, trying to swallow a lump in my throat that tasted of unshed tears, something shifted. That loneliness, that utter rejection, unexpectedly handed me something else. It handed me the key to my own freedom. In that dark little corner, observing the family I had poured my entire life into, the family that now treated me like a burden, like an inconvenience, I made a decision. It wasn't a rash one, not one born of anger, but of a quiet, profound pain. It was the most important decision of my life, one that would change their future forever. They saw me, if they saw me at all, as a fragile, dependent old woman, someone whose only purpose was to serve, to provide, to pay the bills they couldn't quite manage. They believed my love for them was unconditional, that my patience was infinite, like a well that would never run dry. They whispered about a fortune, a legacy, one they assumed was their undeniable right. But what they couldn't yet know was that the very fortune they coveted was about to slip right through their entitled fingers. It was a secret I held close, a power they had never imagined I possessed, not truly. And that night, in that corner, it began to stir. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 72 years old. That might sound like a long time, but it still feels like yesterday. I was a young woman, full of dreams. I spent my whole life as a teacher. Can you imagine? Teaching little ones their ABCs, watching their eyes light up when they finally understood a word, a sentence. It wasn't just about reading and writing. It was about teaching them to dream, to see a world bigger than themselves. That was my passion, my calling. I was widowed young, much too young. My late husband, bless his heart, was a simple and hard-working man. He wasn't fancy, but he was good, solid. And he left me with one mission, one sacred trust, to care for our only son, David. He wanted to make sure David had everything we never did. A better start, a safer future. We had always been careful with money, not for luxuries, not for grand trips or expensive clothes. No, we saved every penny, not for ourselves really, but to build a solid legacy. We wanted security for our old age, yes, but mostly a good, steady foundation for David. We believed in working hard and planning ahead, and so, with our combined sweat and sacrifice, I bought the house. The very house where David lives today with his wife, Sarah, and our grandchildren. It's in Bristol, a lovely place, and it was meant to be their nest, their happy home. I never wanted to live with them, you see. I always felt it best not to intrude, to give them their space, their privacy. But I was always there, always present in other ways, always helping. I paid the council tax, year after year. When they wanted to do renovations, I'd chip in, sometimes covering the whole cost. An electricity bill here, a grocery shop there. It became my way of showing love, a silent support they grew accustomed to receiving. My affection, my care, it all transformed into paid bills and bank transfers. It felt like I was wrapping them in a financial blanket, keeping them warm and safe. Meanwhile, I lived modestly in my own small flat. It was just enough for me, quiet and simple. I did it so they could have every comfort, every ease. They never saw me complain. Not once did I ask for anything in return. For me, truly, seeing my son David and my grandchildren well, thriving, that was the greatest reward. It filled my heart, even if it was from a distance. I just didn't realize that somewhere along the line, for them, I had become invisible. Not a mother, not a grandmother, but a sort of ATM with blood ties. Someone to be tapped when needed, then forgotten until the next bill arrived. But what they forgot, what slipped their minds in all their comfort, was that the owner of the bank, the one who held all the keys, was still me. And that was a truth that was about to echo very, very loudly. And that was a truth that was about to echo very, very loudly. The coldness didn't hit me all at once. It wasn't like a sudden harsh storm. No, it crept in, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a chilly breeze seeping through a tiny crack in a window. At first, you barely notice it. Then, a shiver. And before you know it, the whole room feels drafty, unwelcoming. It started with the calls. My son David, you remember him, my only child, the one I poured my life into? He just stopped returning them. Not every time. Not at first. But more and more often. I'd call, leave a message, a cheerful little update, or just to say hello. And the silence on the other end would stretch longer each time. Sometimes days would pass. Then, a quick text back, or a rushed call saying he was busy. Never really connecting. Not like before. Then, the Sunday lunches. Oh, how I cherished those. Family time. Everyone gathered around. Laughter, stories. Those invitations, the ones that used to be a given, a weekly ritual, they became rare. "We're just so busy, Mum," David would say. Or my daughter-in-law, Sarah, always so poised. She'd have an excuse ready. "The children have so much homework this weekend, Eleanor," she'd explain, her voice polite but firm. "We're just so tired this week, honestly." I tried to understand. Life gets hectic, I told myself. Children grow, schedules change. But then I'd open my social media, something my granddaughter helped me set up, and there they were. Photos. Right. Happy photos. David and Sarah, my son and his wife, out at fancy restaurants, laughing with friends. Weekends away, smiling faces, beautiful places. And suddenly, those excuses, those claims of being too tired or too busy, they felt like a slap, a physical sting. It wasn't that they were busy, it was that they were busy without me. Our conversations, when they did happen, changed too. They became short, clipped, always to the point. And that point, more often than not, was about money. "Mom, the car broke down again. It's going to be a huge repair." Or, "Eleanor, the boys' school just sent an extra bill for a trip. We weren't expecting it." My heart would ache, not just for their struggle, but for the way they approached me. It wasn't a shared problem. It was a request, a transaction. And I, foolish me, I kept helping. Every time, I'd send the money, write the check, hoping that my financial support, my unwavering practical assistance, could somehow fill the growing emotional void. I thought, maybe if I help enough, they'll see how much I care. They'll remember I'm here, that I love them. Each thank you I received grew drier than the last, more perfunctory, a quick formality before they moved on. Each visit, when they deigned to come, was more rushed, their eyes already scanning for the door before they'd even sat down. I started to feel like an old piece of furniture in their beautiful modern house. You know, useful for certain things, maybe a comfortable armchair to sink into for a moment, but ultimately no longer matching the new decor, something to be politely tolerated, a remnant of a past era they had moved on from. They treated me with a distant politeness, a sort of formal deference that somehow hurt more than any outright rudeness. There was no anger, no harsh words, just this ever-growing, unsettling detachment, a wall of civility that kept me out. I would sit in my small flat, surrounded by my own quiet memories, and I'd replay these interactions. The missed calls, the terse conversations, the polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. A knot would form in my stomach, a persistent ache. I knew something was wrong. Deep down, I felt it. But I still didn't fully grasp the extent of it. I didn't know, not yet, that all this indifference, this growing distance, was merely a subtle, agonizing preparation, a softening up, perhaps, a slow, quiet conditioning for the final, most public humiliation. I was bracing for a chilly breeze, but a storm was gathering, just out of sight. I was bracing for a chilly breeze, but a storm was gathering, just out of sight. Christmas Eve finally arrived. I remember feeling a flutter of nerves, but mostly a deep, abiding hope. Despite everything, despite the growing distance, Christmas was different. It was family. It had to be. I made my way to their house, the house I'd bought, with a present for everyone. Each gift was wrapped with care, tied with a pretty bow, a small token of a love that still felt boundless. My heart was full, ready to forgive, ready to embrace the warmth I so desperately craved. But then I stepped inside, and that's when I saw it. The scene that, in a single, painful glance, sealed my fate. The main dining table, their beautiful grand table, was set for dinner. It was truly magnificent, sparkling with crystal and silver, glowing under the soft light of dozens of candles. Every place was meticulously laid out, a name card at each setting. Children, grandchildren, David's in-laws, even distant friends. Everyone had a place. Every single person. My name wasn't there. I stood in the entryway, my bag of carefully wrapped gifts suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in my hands. I searched, my eyes scanning the festive table again and again, as if my name might magically appear. It didn't. Then Sarah, my daughter-in-law, appeared, her smile plastered on, fixed and unnervingly bright. It was a forced smile, I could tell, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. She gestured, a little too quickly, to a small corner of the room, tucked away almost behind the kitchen door. "Oh, Eleanor," she chirped, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "We set up a special little spot for you, just there, so you're not in the middle of all the fuss, with all the children running about. A special little spot." My eyes landed on it. It was a small card table, the kind you pull out for extra guests when you're really desperate for space. It had a cheap plastic tablecloth, thin and crinkly, stretched over it, and there in the middle, a single plate, one lonely fork, one knife, one napkin folded into a triangle. Not crystal, not silver, just plain white ceramic. It looked so out of place, so temporary, so forgotten. I just stood there, motionless, like a statue made of ice. The festive sounds of laughter and chatter from the main room seemed to fade into a dull hum, as if I were underwater. Guests started to arrive then, coats being shed, greetings exchanged. As they streamed in, their eyes, curious and then pitying, would glance from the grand table to me, standing by the card table, my gifts still clutched in my hands. I felt their gaze, a silent judgment, not of me, but of the situation. It was a public casting aside. My son, David, he was there, busy pouring wine, his back to me. He was laughing, chatting, looking so at ease, so much a part of that vibrant, bustling scene. He couldn't bring himself to meet my gaze. Not once. He just kept looking away, his shoulders hunched slightly, pretending not to see his own mother, publicly cast aside in the corner of his own home, the home I had bought for him. No one, not a single person, not a friend, not a relative, said a word to defend me. I was excluded in silence, in front of everyone. The silence was the loudest, most painful sound of all. Eventually the dinner started. I sat at my solitary table, picking at a little of the food Sarah had brought over, my throat so tight I could barely swallow. The roast, the vegetables, the rich gravy, it all tasted like ash in my mouth. I could hear the laughter from the main table, their vibrant conversations washing over me, the clinking of glasses, the joyous clatter of cutlery. They were talking about holidays, about funny stories, about future plans. I was listening, an outsider, a ghost at my own family's feast. It was the bitterest meal of my entire life. There, in that corner, feeling utterly, completely alone, I finally understood. My place in that family no longer existed. Not really. I wasn't a cherished matriarch, or even a welcome guest. I was an inconvenience, a burden. The pain of that rejection, so profound, so absolute, it was like nothing I had ever felt. It was so deep that strangely it dried my tears. There were no more tears left to shed. And in their place, in that quiet, desolate corner, a strength I didn't even know I possessed began to stir. A cold, steady resolve. That night, they didn't just break my heart, they set me free. They handed me a kind of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. A freedom born from the ashes of my own broken hopes. But even with that freedom stirring inside me, that strength I didn't know I possessed, I didn't make a scene. Not then. I didn't shout. I didn't cause a fuss. I didn't even let a single tear fall in front of them. What good would it do? They wouldn't understand. Or worse, they would see it as a performance, another one of my dramas, as David would often say. So I just finished my meal, slowly, carefully, at that solitary table. My throat still felt tight, but I swallowed each bite. When I was done, I pushed my plate aside, folded my napkin, and thanked Sarah quietly. My voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my eyes meeting hers for just a second. There was a flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe discomfort, but it vanished quickly. Then I prepared to leave early. No, I simply stood up, retrieved my coat from the hook by the door, the same hook I'd paid to have installed years ago, and moved towards the exit. David and Sarah, my son and daughter-in-law, saw me off at the door with the same hurried politeness they always did. A quick peck on the cheek, a mumbled, "Happy Christmas, Mum," a suggestion to call them tomorrow. They were already turning back to the warmth and laughter of their guests. I just stood there for a moment, on the doorstep, the cool night air hitting my face. I simply observed them. I watched their faces as they smiled, relieved that the old woman was finally leaving. There was no guilt in their eyes, no hint of regret for the way they'd treated me. Just a certainty, a quiet, arrogant confidence that I would return to being my usual self the next day. The ever-present, ever-helpful Eleanor, ready to be called upon for the next bill, the next favor. They truly believed I was infinite, a wellspring of unconditional love and endless financial support. On the way back to my small flat, driving through the quiet, twinkling streets of Bristol, the sharp edge of pain that had gripped me all evening began to dull. It didn't disappear entirely, but it shifted. It gave way to a cutting clarity, a cold, hard truth that settled deep in my bones. I wasn't going to argue with them anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their attention, for their love. And I certainly wasn't going to seek revenge in the way they might expect, with shouting or accusations. No, I was simply going to put things in their proper place. My place and theirs. I parked my car and walked into my quiet flat. It felt different tonight. Not just quiet, but waiting. I went straight to my small study, a room filled with books and memories. There, I opened the old wooden drawer where I kept all my important documents, the things you don't touch unless you absolutely have to. And there it was, tucked away beneath old letters and insurance papers. The deed to the house, the Bristol house, in my name. It was just as I remembered it. Alongside it, in a neat folder, was proof. Years and years of receipts, bank statements, transfer confirmations, every major expense I'd covered. The council tax, the renovations, the new boiler, the roof repairs, everything. They had forgotten the most important detail of the comfortable, lavish life they were living. They had completely forgotten that the very foundation upon which they built their comfort, their social status, their perfect family image, had an owner. And that owner was me. They had built their world on my generosity, on my silent support, and they had erased me from the picture. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. Instead, sitting there in the quiet glow of my desk lamp, surrounded by those documents, I began to plan. The teacher in me, the one who had spent a lifetime teaching children life's fundamental lessons, knew one thing for certain. The hardest lesson is always the one life teaches with facts, not with words. And my family, my ungrateful, oblivious family, was about to learn a very hard lesson indeed. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. Instead, sitting there in the quiet glow of my desk lamp, surrounded by those documents, I began to plan. The teacher in me, the one who had spent a lifetime teaching children life's fundamental lessons, knew one thing for certain. The hardest lesson is always the one life teaches with facts, not with words. And my family, my ungrateful, oblivious family, was about to learn a very hard lesson indeed. The days that followed Christmas were filled with a silence so profound it was deafening. It wasn't just quiet. It was an active absence. No apologies, not a single message, no phone calls checking in, no hesitant texts acknowledging what had happened, no attempts to bridge the chasm they had so carefully, so publicly created. It was as if that humiliating dinner, my solitary table, my quiet exit, had never happened. For them, life simply went on, unburdened by any flicker of guilt. After a few days, he would reach out, but his voice, when he finally answered, was sharp, impatient. "Mum," he began, without even a hello, "you need to understand that Sarah was stressed with the party, with everything going on. Don't make a drama out of it. The word drama hit me like a physical punch, a clean, brutal blow straight to my chest. My suffering, my profound hurt, my quiet humiliation, it was all just drama, an inconvenience, an annoyance to their perfect, carefully constructed lives. My feelings were a burden, something to be dismissed with a wave of a hand, a sharp word meant to put me back in my place. His voice held no empathy, no understanding, just a demand for me to be quiet, to not rock their boat. I just listened. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply let his words sink in, each one a confirmation of what I already knew. My value to them was conditional, my emotions unwanted. It solidified the cold clarity that had begun to form within me on Christmas Eve. They hadn't simply forgotten me. They had deliberately erased me from their emotional landscape. A week later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Sarah. Her voice was cold and direct, cutting straight through the polite pleasantries. There was no warm greeting, no mention of the festive season, no inquiry about my well-being. "Eleanor," she stated, her tone flat, "the monthly service charge for the house is due next week. Have you paid it yet?" At that exact moment, the last fragile thread of my attachment to them snapped. It was gone. The question wasn't a casual reminder. It was an expectation, a demand. It was the absolute confirmation. They didn't see me as a mother. They didn't see me as a grandmother. I was a provider, a bank. My entire worth, my entire purpose in their lives was measured by the next bill to be paid. My love had been reduced to a recurring debit. I felt the weight of loneliness settle over me then, heavier than it had ever been before. It wasn't just the absence of their company. It was the chilling realization that the family I had loved, the family to whom I had dedicated my entire life, saw me as nothing more than an obligation, a financial utility. The pain was immense, a dull, aching throb deep inside me, but it was accompanied by an unshakable resolve. My decision, made in that dark corner on Christmas Eve, was now cemented, hard as rock. They had pushed me to the absolute limit. They had taken everything they could, every ounce of my generosity, every fiber of my loyalty, and had given nothing but disdain in return. They never imagined that, on the other side of this abyss they had forced me into, I wouldn't simply crumble. They never imagined I would find a strength within me, a quiet, unwavering power they had entirely overlooked. They thought they had won, that they still held all the cards, but they were about to discover how wrong they were. The game was about to change, and I was holding the winning hand. But they were about to discover how wrong they were. The game was about to change, and I was holding the winning hand. After Sarah's brisk call about the service charge, my mind clicked into a gear I hadn't known it possessed. My decision solidified in the quiet aftermath of their coldness now had a clear path. It wasn't about fury anymore, or even sorrow, but a deep, quiet certainty. I needed to speak to them, face to face, not to beg, not to accuse, but to simply state a fact. So, I scheduled a meeting. I called David and Sarah and told them I needed to discuss some important financial matters. I could hear the subtle sigh in David's voice, the hesitation in Sarah's, but they agreed. They probably imagined I needed more money for my flat. Or perhaps I was finally going to complain about my utilities, another one of my little dramas that required their indulgent patience. I knew they'd come, thinking I needed them, expecting another plea for attention, or maybe even a guilt trip after Christmas. That suited my purpose perfectly. Let them walk in with their assumptions. The day came, and I made my way back to their house. The house I'd bought. It felt strange to be there again, not as a guest, not even as an unwanted visitor, but with a different kind of purpose. They arrived shortly after, David looking rumpled from work, Sarah still in her smart everyday clothes, an air of barely concealed impatience about them both. They sat across from me on the living room sofa, the very same sofa I remembered that I'd helped them choose and pay for years ago. I sat opposite them in the armchair, feeling surprisingly calm, almost detached. I didn't offer them tea, didn't try to make small talk. There was no need. I simply reached down beside me and calmly placed a folder on the polished coffee table between us. It wasn't a family photo album full of happy memories they had started to erase. No, it was a sturdy, unassuming manila folder, and inside, crisp and official, was the deed to the house. I looked at them both, my voice firm, unwavering. I called you here to communicate a decision. David shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's polite smile faltered just a touch. They were expecting something, but not this. My steady gaze, my unhurried manner, must have felt foreign to them. This house, I continued, gesturing vaguely around the beautiful room, the home they considered theirs, as you know, is in my name. It always has been. Their eyes widened almost imperceptibly. For years I had the pleasure of lending it to you. My intention was always for you to have a place, a foundation, where you could build a happy family, a secure home for David and for my grandchildren. The two of them exchanged quick glances. Confusion, then a flicker of something else, something I hadn't seen in their eyes for a long time. Fear. It was a raw, undeniable emotion, suddenly stripped bare. They probably thought I was going to demand something, some new financial arrangement perhaps, a belated recognition of my generosity. They were still so far from the truth. I took a slow, deep breath, my hands clasped in my lap. But, I said, my voice softer now, yet carrying a weight that silenced them both completely. After last Christmas, after the way I was treated in this house, I realized something. I realized that my purpose here has ended. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suddenly heavy, still. David's jaw tightened. Sarah's eyes darted around, searching perhaps for an exit, a way to escape the quiet intensity of the moment. I opened the folder then. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a single signed document. It was legally binding, carefully drawn up by my solicitor. I held it up, not for them to read the fine print, but for them to see the official seal, the stark reality of it. I've decided to donate this property, I announced, the words hanging in the air, each one a hammer blow. Starting next month, this house, this entire property, will belong to a charity, a wonderful charity that cares for abandoned seniors, for people who, like me, once felt utterly alone and forgotten. I paused, letting the full weight of my words sink in. Their faces, usually so composed, so carefully neutral, crumpled into pure, unadulterated shock. David's mouth fell open, a silent gasp. Sarah's complexion drained of all color, her eyes wide, staring, utterly disbelieving. They looked like statues, frozen in time, the comfortable world they had built, the one they had taken for granted, crumbling around them. "You'll have 60 days," I concluded, my voice steady, betraying none of the immense emotional journey I had just endured to reach this point, to find a new place to live. There were no shouts, no accusations, no pleas, not yet. There was only the truth, delivered calmly, irrefutably. Their faces were the only response, a canvas of disbelief, fear, and a dawning, terrible understanding. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. My dignity. A dignity I was reclaiming, silent and absolute. And in that stunned silence, I saw a future. For the first time in a very long time, that was truly my own. The game, indeed, had changed, and they were finally, painfully, realizing they no longer held any cards. The game, indeed, had changed, and they were finally, painfully, realizing they no longer held any cards. I didn't move into the big house, the one I had poured my heart and savings into. Not after all that. That house held too many ghosts, too many bitter memories. It was no longer a home for me, nor could it ever be again. Instead, I sold my small flat, the one where I had lived modestly for so long, and with the money, I rented a new place. A lovely, sunny little house near a beautiful park. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, truly mine. A place where my rules, my comfort, and my well-being finally, gloriously came first. It was a conscious choice, a declaration of independence. The first few months in my new home were strangely silent. Not the suffocating silence of loneliness I had known before, the one filled with unreturned calls and unspoken hurts. No, this was a different kind of quiet, a profound, deep peace. It was the sound of a slate being wiped clean, of a heavy burden finally lifted. I didn't have to worry about the next bill, the next favor, the next calculated indifference. I could just be. I started reaching out. I reconnected with some old teaching colleagues, women I hadn't seen properly in years, too busy or too wrapped up in trying to hold my family together. We met for coffee, for walks in the park, and it was wonderful. Their laughter, their stories. It was like finding lost pieces of myself. I also enrolled in a gardening course. I'd always loved flowers, the quiet miracle of growth, but never had the time to truly indulge it. Now my hands were in the soil, learning new things, feeling the sun on my face. It was therapeutic, a gentle balm for my soul. And then I started volunteering, not just anywhere, but at the very same institution, the charity that now owned the house, the one David and Sarah had been forced to leave. It felt right, a full circle. There I learned other stories, met other women who, like me, had faced their own battles, their own quiet heartbreaks. Women who were also relearning how to live, how to find joy after being overlooked, after feeling discarded. We shared meals. We shared laughs. We shared a quiet understanding that didn't need many words. My life, let me be clear, didn't suddenly become some kind of fairy tale. Life isn't like that. I still have good days, days filled with bright sunshine and genuine smiles. And then there are days of quiet longing. Not for the family that hurt me, not for the people David and Sarah had become, but for the family I had dreamed of having. The one I had tried so hard to build, full of love and mutual respect. That ache, that ghost of a dream, it still surfaces sometimes. It's a quiet sadness, but it doesn't consume me anymore. It's part of my story, not my whole story. David tried to contact me a few times. His calls were different now, hesitant. He spoke of forgiveness, of understanding. But I knew, deep down, I knew what he truly missed wasn't me, Eleanor, his mother. What he missed was the security I provided, the endless well of financial support, the comfortable cushion I had always been. He missed the life. It's in easy, honest conversations with a friend, where my words are heard and my presence is valued. And most importantly, it's in the quiet, unshakable certainty that I will never again, for anyone, allow myself to be put at a small table in the corner. I exchanged the heavy burden of their ingratitude for the incredible, soaring lightness of my own freedom. And that, I have learned, is the truest wealth of all. And that, I have learned, is the truest wealth of all. My story, what I've just shared with you, isn't about getting even. It's not about revenge, not at all. It's something much deeper, something more personal. It's about self-worth. It's about finding out what you're truly worth, not in money, but in spirit, in your own heart. It's about understanding that you deserve respect simply because you are you. Sometimes we give so much. We sacrifice so much for the people we love, for our children, for our families. We pour ourselves out, little by little, day after day, year after year. We do it because we want them to have a good life, a happy life. We do it out of pure, unconditional love. But in doing that, in constantly giving, we can sometimes forget one very important thing: to love ourselves first. We forget to save a little bit of that precious love, that care, for the person who needs it most, for the one who lives inside us. We become, without even realizing it, supporting characters in our own lives. We're there, always in the background, making sure everyone else's story is running smoothly, making sure they shine. We're waiting for a nod, a thank you, a little bit of recognition. But sometimes that recognition never comes. We stand there, holding the script for everyone else, while our own story quietly fades into the shadows. And I ask you, truly, from the bottom of my heart, have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever felt that profound, aching emptiness of being there, right in front of them, but completely unseen? Invisible to the very people who should see you most clearly, the ones you've given everything to? Have you ever felt that your effort, your affection, your endless sacrifice was just expected, taken for granted, as if it were your obligation, your duty, something you had no choice but to provide? Like a tap that's always on, always flowing, without anyone ever thinking to thank the source. It's a bitter pill to swallow, isn't it? To realize that what you thought was cherished love was merely expected service. My journey taught me this. Don't wait. Don't wait until you reach your absolute limit, until your heart is completely broken, to realize that the most important person in your life is you. You are the protagonist of your own story. You are the one who truly matters above all else. Your feelings, your peace, your dignity, they are not negotiable. Respect is not something you beg for. You don't plead for it. You don't hope for it. Respect is demanded. It's something you stand firm on. And sometimes, the strongest way to demand it is not with angry words or a loud voice, but with the quiet, firm silence of a door closing. A door closing forever on what was and opening to what can be. So please remember this. There is absolutely nothing wrong with prioritizing your feelings. Nothing wrong with putting your own dignity, your own well-being at the very top of your list. It's not selfish. It's not mean. It's an act of love. The most important love of all, perhaps, self-love. It's about giving yourself the same kindness, the same care, the same unwavering respect that you so freely give to others. It's what allows you to truly live, truly breathe, truly be whole. And that, my dear friend, that feeling of being truly whole, truly yourself, that's what I found. It wasn't in grand gestures or loud declarations. It was in the quiet moments, in the deep peace that finally settled around me after the storm. It was in knowing I had honored myself, finally. It took a long time, and it took a lot of pain, perhaps more than I ever thought I could bear. But I got there. I remember those first few weeks in my new little house, the one by the park. The silence was still sometimes heavy, yes, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of neglect and unreturned calls anymore. It was the silence of possibility, of new beginnings. The air felt lighter, the burden of their expectations, their ingratitude, completely gone. I'd sit by my window, watching the gentle sway of the leaves in the park, feeling the soft sun warm my face, and I'd just breathe, really breathe, deeply and freely, for the first time in what felt like forever. It was like waking up after a very long sleep, a sleep I hadn't even realized I was in. It's funny, isn't it, how a moment of such deep, shattering hurt, like that Christmas dinner, can ultimately become the pivot point for so much good, so much personal growth. I wouldn't wish that specific pain on anyone, truly. But I also wouldn't trade the profound wisdom and the incredible strength it brought me. That moment, sitting alone at that tiny table, it forced me to look inwards, to truly ask myself what truly mattered in my life. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost blinding, that it wasn't their approval, it wasn't their fleeting affection, or their acknowledgement of my generosity. It was my own sense of peace, my own quiet dignity, my own unwavering self-respect. That's an invaluable lesson, you see. One you can't buy, one you can only earn through the hard, often painful, experiences of life itself. It's a lesson that stays with you, guiding your steps long after the tears have dried. Even now, there are moments, little echoes of the past. A memory will surface, perhaps a flicker of David's childhood smile, or a face from that Christmas Eve will flash in my mind. But the sharp sting isn't there anymore. It's been replaced by a quiet, steady strength, a gentle knowing. I've learned to fiercely protect my peace, to cherish my new connections, the simple joys of my gardening, the fulfilling work of my volunteering. I listen to the stories of others at the charity, and I see pieces of myself in their journeys, and I see them, truly see them, for the remarkable people they are. We're all just trying to navigate this winding path of life, aren't we? Trying to find our unique place where we feel seen, truly valued, and genuinely loved. And sometimes, perhaps often, that means bravely building a new place for yourself, brick by gentle brick, with your own hands, with your own resilient heart. This journey has taught me the quiet power of a closed door, and the even greater power of an open window, letting in fresh air and new light. It has shown me that letting go isn't giving up. It's often the bravest act of self-preservation. It's choosing life, choosing joy, choosing yourself, and sharing these real stories, our stories. It's so incredibly important, don't you think? It's how we learn from each other, how we grow, how we remind each other that we are truly not alone in these sometimes challenging journeys. It's like we're sitting down together, you and I, having a quiet chat, sharing a comforting cup of tea. It reminds us that there's immense strength in vulnerability, an incredible power in truly knowing and honoring yourself, no matter what others may say or do. They help us connect, understand, and perhaps find a little bit of our own courage. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this, stay alert. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm that you're still subscribed to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It's just a little thing, I know, but it genuinely helps these messages find their way to those who might need to hear them most. It helps us stay connected, sharing these quiet truths, these powerful, sometimes painful, but ultimately freeing awakenings. Because in the end, my dear friend, knowing your true worth, holding on to your hard-won peace with both hands, and courageously sharing your authentic journey, that's what true living really is. That's finding your own unwavering light and letting it shine brightly, not for anyone else's approval, but purely and simply for yourself. And that, I've found, is the most beautiful, most precious Christmas gift of all. A gift you give yourself.